Hi Bogdan, this is Ahmed Muzammil from Gaper.io. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Ahmed. Good meeting you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Uh, I know you are from London and you have been working at top tech companies, you have worked with startups. So can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm what you call a technologist. I work in the tech domain for since the late 80s, early 90s. A mixture of companies, as you say, mostly enterprise, big tech, but also scale ups and SMEs as well, consultancies, even freelancing. So a mixture of a lot of things. My specialty in the end, you know, uh, it's implementation and implementation of automation, mostly from
Mhm.
classic to AI systems around natural language processing and machine learning, and also the processes around it. So a lot of optimization of processes, keep it simple, keep it easy to change, and keep them effective. Around many countries, usually most continents, obviously not Antarctica, but majority of the world. Um, and really, what I'm after all the time is the experiences of what we call the customer, but it's not just the end user. It could be internal, it could be external, it could be both stakeholders. Whoever happens to make use of those solutions, it's their experience is at the center of what I try to do all the time. So I start with the experience and working myself backwards towards technology, not vice versa. Um, and my background is electronics and telecoms engineering.
Right. So all this time you have been in London, so you have seen the London pre-COVID and post-COVID era. So how do you see the work environment today after all the settlement, ups and downs of the market?
It's unsettled. That's also the influence of AI automation that grew a lot from COVID. COVID actually enabled it more, accelerated it more. The trend started before COVID, but the COVID accelerated it in all aspects. And also the remote work aspects that we knew technically it's feasible, but by process and by the mindset, COVID forced that into. So there's complex changes. It's not just technological, but COVID forced companies and people to think different because of the, well, life impacting critical factors that COVID means. And also the um, shift in, I would say, sort of refactoring of the mindset. People say it's post-COVID. Now it's not post-COVID. It's actually in the middle of it, big time. The only difference is that we know a lot more about it than 3 years ago or 2 years ago. But the long COVID is here to stay and is not in the news, but I would say it's a problem as big as the first wave of COVID. At least in UK, that's pretty much within the million or so people affected by long COVID. The population is 68 million, but likely to be over a million in different phases. And so coming back is they will, of course, have different needs, and they have different needs, not just from healthcare, but generally speaking. Again, not everybody is severely affected, but everybody is significantly affected, those that have long COVID. So COVID, we are not past it. We are in it. And it will be a while when we could say we are post-COVID. Pretty much like the flu, right? But the flu has been going on for, I mean, the vaccines and all for about 70 or so years. So it's well matured. So therefore we can say we are post-flu, but it's taken decades. And so what that means for technology, it means, well, simply the needs will drive that and drive that. We can see that drive that, especially in healthcare, but not just in healthcare, how data is used. And the job market, I believe it's unsettled. There's certain things that, apparently don't make sense. Until a few years ago, when a company was having major layoffs, that was a clear sign that the company is in trouble. That's what it was, because that's why they were making the layoffs. It's a causality there. They have cash flow problems and so on that were deep ingrained, and therefore they had to make layoffs in the end, in big numbers. But in the last two or 3 years or so, I would say, no more than 3 years, it seems to be a kind of virtue, laying people off in great numbers. The value goes up. Why? I have no idea why, but clearly, when you can't cut your hand off, you're not better off, is it? So cuts never deliver progress. Cuts do not deliver progress. Cuts are not saving money. Cuts are cuts. Cost efficiencies is different, and they are rarely based on mass layoffs, very rarely. Unless, of course, as we said, the laws of physics dictate you have an existential problem, you have to make cuts, of course. But, otherwise, cuts are not saving money. And in fact, with deployment of AI, at least at decent scale, the costs are not with the workforce. Majority of costs are not with the workforce. Majority of cost is in getting rid of technical debt, standardizing technology stack, standardizing process, changing mindset, shifting culture, implement very different ways of working. I would say fundamentally different ways of working. All these things take time. They cannot be done in a few months or a year. There's no way. It's just not possible. Again, it's about the laws of physics and biology. And so that's where the costs are. The vast majority of costs are, not with the workforce. Inevitably, the workforce has to be realigned, of course. So, there are readjustment. But mass layoffs are not readjustments, is it? So that's why I'm saying it's unsettled, because what could make sense to have thousands of employees laid off and then the share price goes up? If anything, the share price should go down, because that means that, well, where's the vision? Where's the strategy? The strategy is not working, is it? Of course, layoffs are inevitable, because the company has to readjust, but not mass layoffs. Mass layoffs should be an exceptional thing that will happen every once in a while, of course, because of very stringent scenarios. It can happen, but this would be again a sign of the systemic weakness of the company in a given context, and not a virtue, not something, okay, we lay off 10% of the workforce and the share price goes up by 20% or 30% or even double. It is illogical, and it didn't used to be like that until about 3 or so years ago. It did not. If anything, an investor will say, well, you're not, why would I invest in you? The chances I'm not going to recoup my money in a decent amount of time. So it's more risky, right? So it's unsettled. Also, because of this mass layoffs with little rationale behind it, in the tech industry, people don't have faith anymore. So what happens is that, let's give an example. At Google, there was a guy that actually wrote and delivered the API for navigation. Like, you want to find your way. Now you say everybody uses it. It's a given. But back 16 or so, 17 years ago, that was very much a novelty, right? And a very useful one. So he wrote that and delivered that, amongst other things. 17 years later, he's being laid off with no notice. That's it. Okay, golden handshake, of course, not just wrote up, but again, access cut and so on. So that tells a lot, right? It's a sort of seems a checkbox exercise where skills don't matter that much, and delivers don't matter that much. What matters is the numbers on a spreadsheet. That's how it looks like. And so extrapolate that at many hundreds of thousands across the industries, and people actually ask themselves, why would I strive to go the extra mile since I'm just a number of us on a spreadsheet? Okay, so the loss of confidence is what's driving this mentality, and that means low productivity, and generally speaking, low quality probably in the end.
Makes sense.
Maybe not cutting corners, but deliver just the minimum, because end of the day is not worth it. That's what people talk about right now in the tech industry. And the other thing is, they're all looking to leave, not looking to leave the next day, but keeping their eyes open and always searching for opportunities, while that was not happening before. And that's also a direct result of a loss of trust.
Yeah.
So if we are to talk about the end of humanity, like you saw the hype about, AI and robots will, kill off humankind and all that. That's
Sorry,
not what, it's a loss of trust, right?
before we jump on to I would like to ask a very relevant question where you suggested that these companies might not be doing the best thing, right? So, do you see this happening across the industry, or do you see that there's some companies are doing this and some companies are
No,
going?
it's endemic. It's endemic. It's across the industry, big, small. Um, of course, it's not one single reason all the time for everybody. For example, startups are more vulnerable if they go out of business. That's quite different from a company that has 50K employees making 10% layoffs, but they're still very profitable. They don't have an existential problem at all, not even in the next year or so. But yeah, I mean, maybe the profits will go down, but not by such a margin that you'll say, well, we have a problem. No, not really. So it's not one single reason, but those more prominent companies, it seems illogical. It seems illogical to have not one mass layoff in years. We're talking year on year in various proportion, but always major.
Yeah. So,
Since 2022. Yeah.
how does AI impact that? Do you see that the lack of skill set for existing workforce who are not very AI tuned will help them be laid, will cause a major shift in terms of who to retain and who to let go, and in terms of new hiring in couple of years as well? How, how
No. I think it's has very little to do with skills and how good people are on their jobs. It's little to do with that, and mostly to do with costs. Again, as I said, number of on a spreadsheet. That's my belief.
Right.
Happy to stand corrected, but from talking with people at various levels, from C-level down to middle engineers in the five or so years of experience, they all converge on this point.
Right. Got
Right.
it.
So skills will always matter, but the strange thing is, skills are not the primary reasons, or the quality of delivery is not the primary reasons. And let's be honest, if a company makes big layoffs, major layoffs, because people are not delivering it, then that company has an existential, would that company even have a reason to exist, right? Because the problem is way too big, right? If you lay off 10% of your workforce because they don't deliver, imagine that apart from those 10%, you have many more that are mediocre. They deliver, but only just. So you're talking way over 10%. And then the good people will be what? A fraction. So obviously that company has an existential problem. And so once in a while, one of these company will appear by the nature of things. But this is, again, across the board. This is not one company here and there. This is across the board. And it's little to do with AI either. AI didn't displace significant number of jobs yet. In some domains, yes, for example, in warehouses, but this has been going on for a few years, not a year or two or three. We're talking before COVID, a few years, right? Amazon and all. This is different. So it was gradual, not fast, and very targeted. Right. So, yeah, I mean, you can say your podcast will be automated by AI. Well, who will want to look at artificial created things that convey a message that is, generic and the blurb of a mixture of whatever the data says on the web? But technically, it's possible, right? That doesn't mean it's adding value.
Yeah. Right.
So no, AI is not a significant factor in this layoffs and in the unsettling of the job market. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, very interesting perspective. So I'll jump ship. I'll change the topic entirely towards your. How do you see AI being implemented in big corporates, right? Because all the big corporates are trying to jump on the AI ship, yet we know that all of them are not able to get full use out of it, right? So they are still in the process of, some are experimenting, some are early in their journey, some of them have got a few use cases going. So where do you think what do you think are the most used use casing in this, I would say, in 2024 when it comes to AI?
Well, it's not gonna be what you see on the news for sure. I mean that's again makes little sense. It's catchy, and you say it can do this and that, yeah, but nobody talks about what it means for the users.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody talks it can do this and that. So what? What it means for the users? Oh well, then nobody talks about it because it's hard to identify good things that they mean to the users. However, there are good cases, solid use cases. Again, they are drowned in the hypering. That's why you don't hear much about them. For example, summarization is one. There are risks around it, but it's definitely a solid case in many domains where there's long documents to be read and how would I say, get the message out of them and connect the dots. So that's very much labor intensive. AI can help there. Also, when it comes to customer contacts, where contacts like say chats or emails move around and you get a long thread, really long, that moves around, and if somebody wants to deal with it effectively, has to read the history of it, that spans a number of days or even weeks. And it's not always the same person that reads them because of the nature of how interaction are handled. You have to pass it over from one representative to another because of different skill sets and so on. So summarizing that into a consistent, easy to use format from 10 pages or 5 pages to half a page, it's a very tremendous use case that has proven benefits, not just on paper. And if it's done right, also the experience, it's a lot better, because it is really hard and difficult for teammates and customer representatives to focus and understand exactly not what the problem is only, but also where it is in the conversation, right? This is conversational. So that is difficult, and there's place for a lot of errors and delays, and essentially a lot of friction is introduced. So with summarization, all these things are pretty much, I wouldn't say resolved, but much better. So that's one of the good solid use cases. There are others too, of course, and you hear that in healthcare, but again, very targeted and niche in healthcare, because healthcare is supposed to be personalized. And we know automation doesn't work in personalization because simply there's too much variance, right? And too much change. But on the admin side, in any medical trust, there's a lot of admin to do. That's a lot of scope to automate that using NLP especially. So the admin side of things, making more effective and efficient and waste less time and actually put people to more interesting work than very routine, same old type of tasks. And you know what that means for psychologically a person that does same old day in, day out, they will do mistakes. They're not gonna care anymore because it's all the same every day. It's boring, and boring, it's a big stress, in fact, on the mind. Boredom, it's a big stress, and therefore they're not going to care about the needs of the patients that come to them. And you see that one of the biggest problems in healthcare is around admin and reception. Reception, booking this, booking that, following this, following that, because those people are bored most of the time, because everything that they do has little variance day on day, very little variance. And so with AI, all this is taken away pretty much, and people at the reception in the admin side, they really can focus of, okay, where is this stuck? That requires critical thinking, really requires human traits and so on. That's not going to be automated. And so they will concentrate on the real big problems instead of the day-to-day stuff that it's also needed, but is very repetitive and very boresome. That's another big use case there. So there's a number of big and important use cases, but to deliver AI automation for those, there are prerequisites to be made, to be filled, which is again coming up to standardization. So if you have a multiple operating system in the chain, that's a no. You have to standardize. If you have a few servers with Windows and the rest are Linux, get rid of Windows. Why? Because automation not gonna work. Why? Because those Windows servers have a different life cycle, very different life cycle and needs and all those. So standardization is key. Access to the data is also key. So managing the data in a good way is key, and that's actually tough. That's actually tough because there's a lot of noise in data, and getting rid of the noise or reducing that noise, it's very, very, very challenging. In fact, noise is the biggest challenge in data. And so there's a number of things that businesses have to do to be in the position to implement AI automation at significant scale. These are the principles of automation, right? Any automation requires that. But with AI, there's added complexities. And so it's so much more important because there's a lot of money to be spent to deliver AI at scale. And so the risk is higher to lose money than with classical automation. That's the only difference. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's the answer why businesses don't deploy it at scale, because they have big things to refactor before they can do that. It's not necessarily because of the lack of practical use cases.
Right, makes sense. So very enlightening. Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about this. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Ahmed.